Well, welcome everyone. My name is Bill Rosaitis, and I'm here with my colleague Paul Bepler. We're from the Center for Educational Innovation, and we're going to be talking with you about strategies for online discussion forums. In our previous videos, we've talked about formats for constructing individual and group discussions. And in this particular video, we're going to be talking about strategies for moderating and giving feedback in discussion forums. The goal of online discussion forums should be to encourage engagement and interaction of your students. And one way to do this is through moderation behaviors that encourage students to construct their own understanding of materials and to work together toward building that understanding. So your role as an instructor changes or widens to include being a facilitator of conversations rather than just the primary font of knowledge that students speak to. So what are some tips for achieving these particular goals? Well, first of all, you might consider the kind of feedback that you give students. Really, you can give individual feedback to students. This usually happens in the discussion forum itself, where you may say, I really like that idea. Let's think about the implications. So you're shaping the conversation, but at the same time, you're acknowledging students' work. And it can also happen as a group, or what we think of as a broadcast feedback that can go out through a Canvas announcement or maybe as an email. And this can be a very efficient way to summarize the various threads that have evolved in a discussion forum, while also limiting the number of times you're posting. And I think that's important too, to keep in mind as facilitator. You don't want to be posting to every single student, because I think that signals that you are the person that students should be speaking to, when in your role as facilitator, you should be encouraging students to speak to each other. So you want to be present and signal your presence to students. You want to be encouraging and shaping the conversation, but you really do want to be leading students to construct their own knowledge and to talk with one another. Another way that you may meet that particular goal is to establish a consistent rhythm and variety in your discussion forums. And this can be done by the kinds of feedback you give as well. So if you're giving broadcast or group feedback, maybe you give that on twice a week, or maybe you give it once a week. But that's a kind of rhythm that evolves over the course of time. And it may also have to do with the way that you've designed your discussion formats themselves, so that students get into the habit of the way that they're going to be interacting. And this is predictable and consistent. And they become more and more used to this sort of collaborative role, and they will take off. So it's something that you should think of as a semester-long approach, not something that you just do once or twice. Again, it's important, I think, to call individuals out by name. You can do that, again, individually or in your group posts, but it's a good way to signal presence, to make other students understand that you are engaged in reading, but also that the class is composed of individuals who are all working together. So I like to call students out by name and pay attention to trying to hit all the students in your course over a period of time, so students feel like they're being heard and their messages are being read and valued. Again, this relates to the next bullet, which is trying to involve all students. It's very important to get as high participation as you can in these discussion forums. One way to do that is to assign roles to students in discussions and perhaps shift those around, and to encourage directly students who aren't participating. So to ask them what they're thinking, or to ask them to respond to a particular question from another peer. So hold them accountable for participating in these discussion forums. And the final tip is to get students to interact with each other, not only with you. And so interaction is largely dependent on how you've designed your discussions in terms of the postings and how students are working together. But you can also use various kinds of signaling cues to invite other students to add comments or to speak to each other. So all of these are working toward defining your role as someone who is facilitating the conversation, the online discussion, but not dominating it. So now we're going to turn it over to Paul, and he's going to talk about some strategies for giving different kinds of comments.
Thanks, Bill. So really, I think what Bill's talking about is that you have two roles as a facilitator. You are there to promote social interaction, which is more challenging. I think probably you all know that. And the second role is to deliver direct information, to maybe correct points, to add to a conversation, to respond to a question, things like that, but in a non-domineering fashion, right? So with that in mind, the next question is to think about what are the types of responses you want to see from your students. And it's really important to get a sense of that for yourself. So they could be things like someone is solving a problem, or is providing an alternative, or is showing a different angle on a reading, for instance. Maybe someone is helping another student clarify a point, or maybe bringing a conversation back to the center or where it needs to be if it has devolved into something less productive than what you originally intended. But have a clear sense of what you would consider to be valuable to be able to award points and to honor, if indeed that's what you're going to be doing. Now, we do have a little bit of research on what works in a discussion. A paper in 2019 by Kwong and company looked at 3 different types of comments in a fairly small study on a discussion board. Praise-oriented comments, elaboration encouraging comments, and perspective widening comments. In the first category, the praise-oriented comments, they found no correlation, so no correlation between that and interactivity among students or widening of opinion. Now, having said that, we live in anxious times, right? We have anxious students, we may be anxious ourselves, and so there's a degree to which maybe offering praise is valuable, I would say. And so I think you'd want to keep that in your arsenal of responses. So I'm not going to discount it so quickly. The second type of comment are those that elaborate on comments. And that is correlated with a greater sense of cross-posting among students, as well as noticing that the forum was broadening in its perspective. And the third type of comment, perspective widening comments, those which promote different or evocative moments in I was going to say dialogue, but it's more than that. The conversation is also correlated with a greater cross-posting and a broader sense of the entire conversation as having reached its saturation. So on the whole, one should be trying to really promote the second and third type of comments, elaborating comments and perspective widening comments. Now, when you think about it, all of this is really the underpinning of assessment. How do you assess these, if indeed you're going to assess them? And that's going to be the topic of our next video.